I never mentioned this, but I love tactical shooters.
But there's fire in the doorway.
Then again, I'm probably not playing them right. Tactical shooter games have been popular for a very long time. While I don't know when tactical shooters really took off, games like Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six series, Tarkov, Hell Let Loose, Postscriptum, and Ready or Not are some of the few examples that I know from the top of my head that incorporate tactical shooter elements. For a few of them though, they sort of intermingled with the hardcore genre, especially the last 3 games I mentioned, as they have a pretty huge focus on gun lethality and careful positioning. Obviously there's more than just those 2, but I'm not smart enough to think of more examples. Those types of more realism-oriented tactical shooters are few and far in between, at least they are to me, but they're all enjoyable in their own right and in recent times found pretty big communities around them. However, one tactical shooter game that I undeniably love is Rising Storm 2 Vietnam, a spin-off game from the popular historical shooter game Red Orchestra. The series started out in 2006 as Red Orchestra Ostfront 4145, a game about the Second World War's Eastern Front between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. Now, I don't know much about the first game, but around 5 years later, a sequel was developed simply called Red Orchestra 2 was released. This game was a huge improvement over the first game, but more importantly, it eventually led to the release of a big DLC called Rising Storm, which took place on the Pacific Front of World War II, pitting the United States against Japan. Soon after that, in 2017, a direct sequel to Rising Storm was made, now taking place more than 20 years after the end of World War II in the jungles of Vietnam. I know this intro is getting lengthy as hell, but bear with me here. I actually started this series with Rising Storm 2 right around the update that introduced the Army of the Republic of Vietnam, or ARVN, in 2018. I can't emphasize how much I love this game. Whenever I got home from school, the first game I'd boot up would always be Rising Storm 2. Here in Australia, there were always 3 or more active servers with nearly full capacity, and spending a lot of time mostly just stupidly charging into battle like a goddamn idiot.
Eat my f***ing pistol, you
Back before I changed my channel in 2020, I made a few videos about Rising Storm 2. Sort of a product of edgy 2018-2019 cringe, but in some way I look back at them with misty-eyed nostalgia, as Rising Storm 2 nowadays, especially after Antimatter Games announced they're ceasing development on the game despite promising even more updates, is basically dead. In Australia as well, with only the most active servers in America or somewhere in Asia. Anyways, enough about my love for Rising Storm 2. The game I'm talking about now is Frontline Karelia, a Roblox tactical shooter game taking place during the continuation war between a Germany-supported Finland and the Soviet Union from 1941 to 1945. The game is heavily inspired by the Red Orchestra series, as stated by its creator in a joke reply, Lizirin. They do allude to the Red Orchestra in a few other messages, so I'm just going to assume that's what Frontline Karelia is inspired by. Additionally, the game is still in development, so obviously there's going to be a lot of changes made after I make this video. I'm pretty sure there's going to be concerns that my take on Karelia will inevitably have a few biases, particularly since I did mention I have a love for Rising Storm 2, but rest assured that I've decided to see the game the way people see my channel, as negatively as humanly possible. Frontline Karelia is indeed a challenging tactical shooter. It's pretty enjoyable, and despite how difficult it is, I feel like I can consider this sort of a casual game, at least for me personally. However, there are obviously a few issues I have to point out, like how the game is pretty hellbent on using Roblox's janky physics as part of its movement system, the pretty sluggish progression system, and some more specific issues that I can't really explain here without using Rising Storm 2 as a direct example. Most of Karelia's features are based on Red Orchestra 2. For one, the 2 teams, the Finnish Army and the Russian Red Army, have asymmetrical loadouts. This is a class-based tactical shooter, but although serving similar roles, are given different weapons that may perform similarly or differently. That's not to suggest any of the guns are better than each other though, as all guns are lethal. The way you win the game depends on how you play it. Just because your gun shoots faster, most of the game is favoring your recoil control, reaction speed, and strategizing. You'll be thinking on the spot as you go, and you'll be doing that a lot. Thinking is key. Before I elaborate on that, I should explain the class selections a bit. These might be a little bit confusing, but it's easy to understand once you start playing more often. After choosing your team, you're given the option to choose between several classes, some of which are exclusive to certain maps. Generally though, there are 6 basic classes present in all maps. Firstly, there's the Rifleman. They're equipped with a basic bolt-action rifle at the start. As you progress, you get better bolt-action rifles and can use bayonets as a melee option. Riflemen are obviously great for sniping, but the closer they are to a battle, the harder they find trying to survive since close-quarter fighting are not exactly ideal conditions for riflemen. Secondly, there's the automatic riflemen. They're equipped with a semi-automatic gun, which is a little ironic considering their name. They're given a bit more firepower than the basic riflemen since they have semi-autos than bolt actions, though you should still exercise caution since you're bound to run out of ammo quickly if you're reckless with your gun usage. Thirdly, there's the assault class. They're equipped with submachine guns. They're essential in both defensive and offensive roles despite the name. Assault soldiers are usually the best at clearing buildings or, in some scenarios, suppressing.
I'm bomb rushing the building, but there's fire in the doorway.
Oh my god!
Did you just kill like 5 people?
Oh, no, I killed like 3 people!
Is that you?
Yeah, that was me! Oh my god! I bled out. I bled out. But I killed like 3 people.
However, you're definitely bound to run out of ammo quickly if you're not careful with how many times you use your gun, and also submachine guns generally have terrible range. Next, there's the machine gunner. They're equipped with light machine guns. They're usually best at suppressing, and because of the weight of their guns, they can't aim down the sights. To properly use a machine gun, you need to either lay down or find a comfortable crouching spot to place down your weapon, since all machine guns come with a bipod. Even though machine gunners are deadly when used correctly, they're weak when on foot because they have to rely on inaccurate hipfire and, even when the bipod is being used, tend to have really terrible recoil control. It's terrible. Fifth, the sapper. They're equipped with bolt-action rifles like the riflemen, but come with the additional ability to build sandbags and erect barbed wires, but only when they're nearby high-attached sapper supplies. Finally, there's the squad leader. I haven't played the game enough to unlock them, but they get exclusive access to more controllable submachine guns and pistols. Depending on the team, you either get a 1928 A1 Thompson submachine gun as part of America's historical Lend-Lease program to the Soviet Union, or the German MP40 on the Finnish side. If I'm not wrong though, they also get to call in artillery or smoke strikes if needed, not too dissimilar to the role filled by commanders from the Red Orchestra series. There's also another class called the Signalier for the Soviets, but I have no idea what they do since I've never played them. I think they're meant to be similar to the radio men from Rising Storm 2, whose entire role is to sit next to the commander as a convenient radio station rather than having to seek out a stationary radio to order artillery strikes.
Bless the bomb up! Drop the bomb, man!
Each class have unlockable loadouts. You can't really change what gun you want to use like in a more traditional FPS sense, but instead, you have unique class-based loadouts that changes what you carry, maybe like a different bolt-action rifle with a bayonet for the riflemen, or maybe unlocking a submachine gun with a larger ammo capacity for assault. You can also customize your character with a wider range of cosmetics available via game passes, but to be honest, I haven't even bothered touching customization at all.
Yankee with no brim!
Initially, when you start out, classes are locked depending on your rank and level. This bit usually gets a little confusing, but to simplify it, there are 2 different levels you should be looking out for. Firstly, there's the global rank, which serves as the general game level that lets you unlock more advanced classes as you play more, and the individual soldier rank, which is how experienced you are with a specific class. Although both are important, the global rank is important for unlocking classes, while the individual soldier rank is important for unlocking better loadouts for certain classes. As the way I framed it suggests, each class has their own unique experience bar, meaning that to unlock better guns for each class, you have to play each class frequently in individual playtimes to grind for the loadouts. Yeah, it's pretty confusing, but the leveling system is similar to how it was done in Red Orchestra 2. Moving on to the actual gameplay, after choosing your class, you're thrown immediately into the battle without much fanfare. Everything here has to be learned through trial and error, but given that I used to play Rising Storm 2, I was able to see everything from the get-go. To get the important details down, you can switch between third and first person, but third person is extremely restrictive and doesn't let you aim properly, so the game heavily encourages first person gameplay. Your character has 3 separate bars: a weight bar, suppression bar, and stamina bar. The weight bar determines how much you're carrying. This value fluctuates depending on what you have, either be it carrying a heavy gun or lighter equipment. It affects your movement speed, essentially. The suppression bar determines your character's current state. I have no idea how to describe this properly, but basically, the bar being full indicates you're in a calm state. If a bullet lands near you, past you, or hits you, the suppression bar goes down, which makes your character more panicked, making them less stable when aiming down weapons. The stamina system is a stamina system. It's consumed by sprinting or by holding your breath while aiming. All the guns are obviously very lethal. A single shot to the chest from a rifle or machine gun could mean death, and a direct headshot, regardless of a gun's caliber, is always an instant kill. Aiming with guns requires sufficient recoil control. Submachine guns are especially pretty ridiculous since the high fire rate means you'll be pulling your mouse down pretty often. The same goes with machine guns, though they do require you to be in a stationary position that lets you bipod the gun before using them. Throwing grenades are a little tricky. Your character has a deceptively short throwing range, so be careful when trying to throw grenades or else you might hit yourself. Hipfire is extremely inaccurate and should only be done in panic situations. Machine guns can't be aimed down normally without using bipods in a stationary position, which I've already mentioned like many times already. So again, hipfire should only ever be used as a last resort.
Dude, you oh my god, you window hogger.
Should you somehow miraculously survive getting shot, like getting shot in the arms or legs, or in the rare scenario of surviving a chest shot, you'll likely be forced to bandage yourself. All classes are equipped with bandages by default, so pulling up bandages to quickly patch up bleeding limbs is vital to survival. However, sometimes bleeding out might be inevitable since you can bleed out from multiple limbs at once. Speaking of limbs and bleeding out, your character's health bar is invisible to you and determined by how riddled with bullets you are and how red your screen is. Your limbs are important in factoring what needs bandaging. If you have more than one limb bleeding, you have to manually patch up multiple limbs at once, which means using your bandages multiple times.
I forgot to mention this in the recording, but you can also pick up like weapons from dead people, so in some of the footage you can see me using multiple weapons at once, and at one point I also nicked a MP40 off of the dead German and used it for my own gain. This is a core mechanic in Red Orchestra 2 and also Rising Storm 2.
Beyond the basic gameplay, Frontline Karelia also offers a few selection of maps and game modes, though the game modes are dependent on the map. So far, there are 3 game modes: Breakthrough, Conquest, and Sabotage. Breakthrough is a traditional attack or defend game mode. You know how it goes, one team defends and the other attacks. To successfully do the objective, players in both teams must commit to their intended class roles like sappers building defenses, machine gunners laying down suppressive fire, riflemen taking out long-distance targets, and both assault and auto riflemen being well equipped to take on close-range engagements, more so on the assault part. Conquest is a little more linear than what people know of similar game modes in other games. Instead of both teams going out to capture as many capture points as they could to rack up more and more points for their team, Karelia's format is to have both teams linearly attack 3 points, A, B, or C. For example, the Soviets must capture C before going on to B and A. Finland, on the other hand, must capture A before going to B and C. If one of the teams captures B first, the team with fewer points will have to attack B before managing to get to the other team's initial capture point. Finally, Sabotage is a game mode revolving around destroying objectives progressively. It's a little bit similar to Breakthrough in that a team must secure an objective before moving on to the next one, while the defending team has to stop the attackers. For Sabotage, however, the attacking team has to use sappers to set up satchel charges to blow up an objective instead of traditionally capturing it. An interesting feature in Frontline Karelia that I haven't really seen much in other games is the historical accuracy of the maps. I haven't seen any other game explicitly state whether a map in the game is either historical or not, though it should be noted that non-historical maps do take place in real locations. This is pretty neat, as even if the current round took place on a map where a battle never happened or only happened on a technicality in our real-world history, it adds to the immersion value and complements the development team's dedication to creating an authentic shooter experience on Roblox. Or at least as authentic as Roblox can get, given that some people have commented in my videos that you can't really take Roblox characters seriously with their static-ass faces and blocky bodies.
Behold, you have no idea who this thing is, do you? It belongs in the new, the third decade of the current century.
This is as much as I can really say about the gameplay. It's clear where Frontline Karelia draws the line of inspiration from Red Orchestra, down from the leveling system, the punishing combat, and the strong emphasis on tactical positioning. While I do enjoy Karelia's gameplay, I think the development team has a few issues they need to address first and foremost. For one, I did enjoy Frontline Karelia. While I haven't really gone into tactical shooters on the same scale as Rising Storm 2 for years now, Karelia fills the missing hole in my heart that Rising Storm 2 left. Obviously, some people could point out that 83, the Cold War Gone Hot game by Antimatter Games, the same people behind Rising Storm 2, is also coming out, so I could have just waited for that. Quick thing, I know that Antimatter Games basically doesn't exist anymore since their parent company nuked them out of existence, but 83 got a new studio working behind it, so I have high hopes for that game. The thing is though, I've been waiting for a long time for a game that has similar mechanics to Rising Storm 2 to make a big break in the gaming scene, but I didn't really know about Frontline Karelia on Roblox until I decided to just try it out one day. Frontline Karelia's emphasis on a slow, methodical, yet also intense and stressful gameplay experience is probably one of the best things Roblox has to offer on the platform currently, so all credits go to the development team on that. The strong encouragement on proper tactical placements, team coordination for attacks or defenses, and strategizing to avoid quick, stupid deaths pits players together or against each other on their toes to create a very fun, if not sometimes frustrating experience. I especially like how powerful all the guns feel. While I've seen some people complain about how this or that bolt action rifle doesn't feel powerful enough, especially the finished Mosin Nagant, and the one time I was accused of cheating despite my opponent missing all his shots on me, I think Karelia's preference towards a realistic depiction towards guns, up to including their hard to control recoil, works greatly towards their favor in discouraging stupid acts of charging. That is, unless your entire team charges, to which the overwhelming human wave attack probably has some psychological effect on the enemy, which is funny to see. Even though the game doesn't have a dedicated sniping class, the fact that even a lone rifleman can still pose a danger to a team just based on range alone signifies to me that all classes serve their intended roles to a fault. There is no true best or worst class.
I got two in one burst.
As they're all suited to a specific purpose, which when played accordingly in a team, creates a very powerful class dynamic among them. Obviously, Karelia doesn't compare to other Roblox shooter giants like Bad Business, Frontlines, Gunfight Arena, Big Paintball, if it counts, maybe Centaura, or even Phantom Forces. If anything though, Karelia is a niche tactical shooter experience that I urge everyone should at the very least try, even if it's only for one round.
Ooh. Oh, whoa.
And then there's a crap I have to complain about. First of all, third person is kind of useless. I don't really see a purpose in having third person be enabled, so I just pretend it doesn't exist aside from annoying the living shit out of me when I have to go back into first person whenever I boot up the game. The progression system being split up into a global rank and individual class rank annoys me a little bit, since you'd have to spend extra time playing a class that, given that they have class limits, aside from the riflemen, will probably miss out on playing more often. As much as I praise Frontline Karelia for its brutal gameplay, I can't really say much for its over-reliance on janky Roblox physics as part of the game's movement system. Trying to climb into any building or trying to vault a fence is just stupidly hard. Realistically, you'd expect your character to be able to fit through a giant wooden window, but no, your character's too fucking fat to fit through the goddamn thing.
Oh, come on.
About the weapons though, I don't have any issues with most of them aside from two categories: bolt action and light machine guns. Bolt actions are pretty inconvenient to use. This isn't because of how utterly outmatched they are in close quarter combat, which I pretty much don't care about and is fine with, but more so how you have to wait for the bolting animation to finish completely. What I mean by that is, let's say you're in a tense combat situation. You just killed someone with a bolt action rifle, but you have to sprint to cover. You're bolting your gun and you duck into a house. You're about to shoot another shot at the enemy, but guess you didn't bolt your gun because sprinting cancelled your bolting animation. Wonderful, now you have to bolt again before firing, and boom, maybe you got the kill, a little bit delayed, or maybe you're f***ing dead. Keep in mind, even though I know about that issue, I still consistently fall for it while playing Rifleman because I'm just so used to how convenient it was to bolt and sprint in Rising Storm 2. Machine gun recoil while bipoded is also just unacceptable, at least personally. You'd expect a bipod machine gun to have better recoil control when you've got a comfy place to lay down and use it, but no. The development team woke up and went, "Oh, what if the machine gun recoil was just universally uncontrollable, like it's having a panic attack on its own?"
This gun's recoil is so ass!
As much as Frontline Karelia encourages tactical placement, which I've basically repeated until my throat has died at this point, it's curious to see how the development team just straight up didn't implement a simple leaning system. In most tactical shooter games outside of Roblox, leaning is one of the core features that players can use to their advantages to peek into an unseen hallway or out of cover to quickly scan for any potential dangers, or as a sneaky counterattack to an enemy who can't react fast enough. It was a feature that was present in Red Orchestra 2, so I can't for the life of me understand why leaning doesn't exist in Frontline Karelia. It's a lot better than trying to sneak into a cheeky third-person view before attacking an unsuspecting enemy who happened to turn the corner. Also, adding onto the whole leaning problem, Frontline Karelia would benefit a lot if players could crouch sprint. Obviously, it would take slower than sprinting while standing upright, but it would save a lot of players' skins if a crouch sprinting system was implemented. Don't have to worry about getting shot by sniper fire or machine gunner fire when you can just crouch sprint behind cover. Again, it was a feature in Red Orchestra 2. So Frontline Karelia would benefit a lot more if the development team took features beneficial to the player from their inspiration and implemented into the game. Now this part was made during the editing process, but one thing I have to ask for the development team is, well, earlier I did praise about the historical accuracy, or at the very least how the development team went out of the way to state which map are historical, semi-historical, or non-historical. Now for one map in particular, which I have pretty big issues with, the Assault on Olonets map, which I believe is a Soviet attack map, but I might be wrong, and it's stated to be non-historical. Normally I would be fine with this because I'll admit I don't know a lot about the continuation war, but one thing I do have issue with is the fact that why is one of the objectives you have to defend a f***ing tick statue? I know this map was non-historical, but the problem with that is an actual battle in Olonets did actually happen in real life. It was an operation in East Karelia by the Finnish, and at the same time, I don't really like this map, but not because it's terribly balanced, but because it completely takes me out of the immersion every time I see that f***ing tick statue. And you can't ignore it either, because look, if it was just like a side Easter egg, like you put it in like a corner of a map, and that would have been fine. You would literally have to go out your way to find it. But in this case, it's a capture point. You need to go and capture a f***ing tick statue. Why? Actually, you might be seeing a trend here. I'm definitely relating the game's issue a lot to Red Orchestra 2, aren't I? Because I sure as hell am going to use this as a way to transition into my next point. What Frontline Karelia can learn from Rising Storm 2. It could be argued that this part should have just been absorbed into the first half of the review, but I felt this was important enough to highlight on how Karelia could improve on its gameplay. This is entirely subjective, but here's a couple of things I think Karelia's development team could take from Rising Storm 2 and implement into their game. For demonstration purposes, I actually reinstalled Rising Storm 2, which I haven't played in around 2 years now, just to showcase the mechanics that I think could work well in Karelia. First off, there should be a way to check how much ammunition is left in the gun. In Rising Storm 2, and this was also present in Red Orchestra 2, if you hold down the reload button while holding a gun, your character will inspect the weapon to check how many bullets are left in the magazine. It doesn't tell you directly how many bullets are left in the magazine, so you can only estimate how much by the game telling you whether it's full, nearly full, half, or nearly empty. Secondly, as I complained before, there should be a leaning system and crouch running system. It would definitely add flavor to Karelia's tactical gameplay by giving players more options in regard to maneuverability. Thirdly, machine guns that are currently using bipods should have more controllable recoil. I feel like it would be more consistent that way instead of laying down or getting behind cover, than attempting to hit a player and being unable to because the recoil basically flings all over the place. That also being said, when bipodding, you should also be able to duck behind cover and also reload behind cover, which is also a feature in Rising Storm 2 and Red Orchestra 2, which just makes machine gun users have better survivability in my opinion. Fourthly, and this is a minor one, but players should be able to bolt the gun and sprint at the same time, but only being able to bolt before sprinting as depicted in Rising Storm 2. Finally, this is another optional thing, and this feature could only really be used in bigger maps, but Rising Storm 2 has a feature that lets you zero your sights and compensate for range. I think this is a little harder to justify for a game like Karelia, since most maps are quite close quarter oriented, but I think it will be a nice touch and add a layer to the game's complexity. Now, some of you may point out that how Rising Storm 2 and Red Orchestra 2 have wildly different mechanics and massive changes made in between the two games' development, and how Karelia specifically takes cue from Red Orchestra 2 and not Rising Storm 2. I do know that. For one, Rising Storm 2 did away the stamina bar, so no player suffered from a movement penalty for sprinting too often. They also removed a bonus team coordinate charging ability that was available for the Soviets in the Japanese and Red Orchestra 2, or the Rising Storm DLC. So in some sense, Rising Storm 2 is basically if you turned Red Orchestra 2 into a more sort of arcade-oriented game. Not fully, because they still maintain a lot of Red Orchestra 2's mechanics, so it's just streamlining things. If anything though, I simply justify this with how Rising Storm 2 still kept several features that were present in Red Orchestra 2, namely crouch sprinting, leaning, and ammo checking. It's what made Rising Storm 2 quite accessible, at least for me. Frontline Karelia is a Roblox shooter that takes major inspiration from Red Orchestra 2, a World War II shooter with a strong emphasis on tactical realism. Many of Karelia's features borrow from Red Orchestra 2, namely the leveling system, class system, gun lethality, and encouraging cooperative player behavior. This niche game presents the perfect balance of a somewhat authentic, challenging, yet fun experience that, with some trial and error, most new players can fit in perfectly. Although Frontline Karelia is excellent in presentation and gameplay, it suffers from varying issues stemming from terrible ROBLOX physics, a rigid gunplay system like bolt action rifles being interrupted too easily by simply sprinting, and missing features that are vital to the core tactical experience that is usually present in other games of similar genre. Frontline Karelia is a niche game with a dedicated community and an even more dedicated development team. Hopefully, interest in tactical shooters mean that new players will try out Karelia. For me though, Frontline Karelia fills a void that has been missing from me for a long time. The void left by Rising Storm 2, and goddamn, does Karelia fill that void pretty well.